Indie film review. I'm still trying to figure out an intro. I don't really know if that worked. Was it a bit jarring? Maybe it was a bit jarring. Maybe with the snappy and then the clappy, it was a bit... Anyway, indie film review. Luz Cabrales, and I hope I'm saying that correctly, Shadows of the Past is this anthology horror, and straight from the very first frame it sets this very distinct tone. The brooding score, for a start, the score is very prominent, and the visuals, the tone, everything. There's 4 teens and they've come to an abandoned gothic mansion, basically, and straight from the get-go you feel like you're in some 90s gothic horror movie. I don't know if it was intentional that it seemed quite retro, but it does. In fact, the film is almost aggressive with its bold atmosphere, but it works. It works somehow for this film, this setting. It creates something visually very, very interesting. And just as you'd expect, the house is filled with flickering candles, dusty old portraits, and creepy statues. It has this nostalgic charm, like you're watching something for the first time in years that used to freak you out as a kid. This is an anthology horror, but not throughout the whole thing. About the first half is 3 different stories, each of them revolving around a moral misstep, so defiance, dishonesty, and envy.
What did you say, fella?
I said no. Liar! He must be made of wood!
And what do we do with wood, Nancy?
Burn it!
Burn it!
Each of the stories is about the consequences of those actions. But don't expect neat conclusions to these stories. They are more about the atmosphere and the mood than the narrative itself. And that atmosphere and mood is really effective. There is some really good imagery here, some really interesting visuals. It's genuinely spooky throughout the whole runtime. And they unfold in quite a dreamlike, nightmarish sort of way. But sometimes the narrative structure becomes so abstract that it's sometimes at the expense of a coherent narrative. The score, as I mentioned, is loud, almost distractingly loud. However, as the film progresses and your ears adjust, it becomes quite effective. Like I said, the film is really good at building that mood, that atmosphere, that dread. It's jarring, the score, but not in a bad way. It takes a minute for you to settle into it. It creates this ever-present tension that never really lets up. For me, the strongest of these stories was the one about a ballet dancer overcome by jealousy for her understudy. And it's shown through this long abstract ballet sequence where the two are performing together. It's the most entrancing part of the film, the most visually stunning, the music, it all just comes together really, really nicely. It's the simplest segment of the film, but the most effective, and shows Cabrales' willingness to lean into more experimental filmmaking. The other stories are interesting, but they're not as complete. Seems like there's a lot of context and lore that kind of gets omitted, and ultimately it leaves you wanting a little bit more lore, a little bit more insight into why these things are happening, who these people are, and ultimately what the purpose is. Do you know what these stories feel like? They feel like the things that parents tell their children to stop them from misbehaving. You know, if you do this, if you're jealous about something, then this is going to happen. It doesn't always make a whole lot of sense. Maybe the logic isn't really there, but it seems scary, and it's enough to make the children listen to their parents. But having said that though, the person who's telling these stories is the old man who lives in the mansion that the kids have come into.
When you walk out that door, you're heading for some big trouble. But if you stay here, you'll not only be safe, but you'll be giving an old-timer some company. Something I haven't had in a long time.
So maybe this kind of disjointed, illogical storytelling is the point, because it adds this folkloric fable quality to the film. You know, stories that don't always make perfect sense, but they do stick with you. And in the latter part of the film, it shifts from anthology to something more singular as the stories sort of come together, but then the unfoldings open up more questions. But I don't think that resolution is the goal here. The goal is atmosphere, it's dread, and all the things that it does really, really well. The horror is built on that uncertainty, built on those unanswered questions, on the unexplained. Shadows of the Past really thrives on its tone and its ambition. It's a bit like a giant show reel of Cabrales' horror work and her willingness to take risks, her willingness to lean into unconventional ways of filmmaking. And if it was her goal to position herself as a horror filmmaker that can really make something uneasy, atmospheric, and full of dread, then I'd call this a raging success. Shadows of the Past is not perfect, but it certainly has its strengths, and Luz Cabrales, I think, is a filmmaker to watch for in the horror space. you can find the full written review of Shadows of the Past at www.outsidethespotlight.com. I'll leave all the relevant links in the description of where you can watch Shadows of the Past as well. As ever, like this video if you liked it. If you want to see more movie content, movie reviews, indie reviews, I'm aiming to do once a week for long form content. I'm still seeing how that all goes. I'm still seeing how long form content works for me. But the channel is always active. I upload shorts every other day. So make sure you subscribe to see it all. I'm struggling to think of an outro here. So, like and subscribe. See you later.